All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for being here today. We'll get started here in just a second as we wait for folks to join on in. Thanks everyone for being here. All right, we'll get started here in just a second. Awesome. Let's jump right in. So today's topic is 7 demand generation strategies for cybersecurity. And essentially what this is this my background is in demand gen. So as you can see in the bottom right corner here, as a former demand gen leader, probably spent about a decade in demand gen esque roles. And most recently, I've been a fractional demand gen consultant, mostly working with early stage cybersecurity companies and other companies. And so I've tried everything, and not maybe not everything, and be a little hyperbolic, but I've tried a lot of things and found a lot of successes, found a lot of failure. And so this is learnings of kind of principles or strategies. There's principles. There's a lot of tactics. We'll get into some tactics towards the end of the webinar. At the beginning, there'll be a lot more strategic stuff, even some go-to-market things that if you don't get right, you won't be able to generate demand. You won't get book meetings. And really the outcome is, when I think of generating demand, is some of this is applicable for maybe an SMB or a B2C offer, and I know some folks in the community are in that space, but this is mostly around enterprise or mid-market deals where, hey, the goal is to book demos, to book sales conversations with your sales team, and to get people interested in your product to do that. So once again, my background is that I'm also the CEO and the founder of this community. So really excited to spend time with you all and share with you what I've learned, what I'm continuing to learn, and hopefully it'll be helpful for you in your teams when it comes to how do we generate more demand, because we know it seems to get harder and harder every single year. So a little bit based on our agenda today is we're going to be talking about some background, where are we at, where are we going. We're going to talk about some how to capture demand versus generate it. We'll go into 7 strategies, and then also, if we have time, I'll try to answer any of your questions. If you have questions throughout, please just put them in the chat. I'll try to answer them as we get going. And please feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll try to answer them throughout. Awesome. Let's talk about background a little bit. So where are we at? It's May 2025 right now. The last couple of years have been definitely crazy as far as the challenges when it comes to go to market in general, but also just generating demand. Kind of the tip of the spear, as I like to say, when it comes to go to market, is how do you get people interested in your product to talk to your sales team or to do a demo. And I've heard it said that the hardest part of sales or go to market or marketing or anything is that how do you book demos, right? How do you get people on a call? And especially if you look at even the buyer's journey, it's if you look at all the stats, Forrester came out with a stat with 85% of the buyer's journey happens before you even talk to sales. So you're looking at this weird, there's lots of factors that are contributing to it. But what we know is, looking at the data, that our GTM efficiency is only going down. So this data is actually about a year old. So this is 2024 Q2, but BenchSite has some great reports. This is looking at publicly traded SaaS companies in general. And what's interesting is, there's definitely some cybersecurity companies in here that are publicly traded. I would love to do a graph that's just publicly traded SaaS companies that are cybersecurity focused, right, or have a strong cybersecurity offering. That's and I've actually reached out to BenchSite to see if they're interested in doing that and doing a specific report on that. Because I think it'd be really helpful to see specifically our sector. But in general, this is looking at all of them. If you look at Palo Alto Networks or CrowdStrike or any of the large publicly traded cybersecurity companies, they have very similar go-to-market efficiencies, how much they spend on sales and marketing, et cetera. But what this tells us is how much we're spending on sales and marketing as a percentage of net new revenue. So for every $1 of net new ARR, it's costing us in Q2 of 2022, it's costing us $2.50 to acquire that net new ARR. And as you can see, in general, it's only gone up over the last 5 years. And I haven't seen the most recent stats, but I'm pretty sure this has only gone up or maybe plateaued a little bit just because folks have been focusing on GTM efficiency in the past year or two. So it's definitely been challenging, right? I think we all are experiencing that it's harder to get new customers, especially new customers, right? Like this demand generation isn't so much focused on expansion or retention, right? Those are super important. NRR, GRR, those are all super important metrics and things to look at. This is not so much, focused on that. I do think they all kind of play together. So a lot of your demand gen strategies can integrate your customers, can integrate folks that are in the sales cycle already. So don't forget that. But this is specifically looking at net new ARR and net new logos. And once again, the tip of the iceberg, the tip of the spear is how do we get new ARR? How do we get new customers? How do we get new booked meetings, et cetera? So if you're feeling like, oh man, this is only getting harder, you're not alone. Everyone's experiencing that, especially in the public sector, right? And so I think part of the reason why I started this community is because I want for us to all learn together, figure out how to do this better, learn from each other, hopefully partner together so we can go further, et cetera. And hopefully bring those numbers down, right? And make us all more efficient, make us hit our numbers, and ultimately get our security products delivered, make the world more secure. So another kind of background is obviously the landscape, right? So this is Optiv Cybersecurity Technology Map. And this is like, the stats I've heard is there's 6,000 cybersecurity technology offerings out there, at least. And there's upwards of 50,000 cybersecurity managed service offerings out there. So folks offer a service. So there's a ton of competition. I don't think this is necessarily unique to any sector. If you look at the MarTech sector or sales tech or health tech or AI or any of these other, sectors, fintech, they all have a ton of competition too. So I don't necessarily think we're unique in that. Maybe we are. Maybe there's more competition per buyer than in the cybersecurity space. But in general, there's just a ton of competition overall, right? I think you look at AI, globalization, you look at the cost of starting a new business. All these factors, I think, have only made the competition landscape that much more challenging. And so we have to keep this in perspective, right? So I think that's part of the reason why it costs more to acquire new customers is the competition. I think the cost of delivering ads, the cost of talent, everything has only gotten harder over the years, but competition is definitely a big factor in that. And we'll talk a little bit more of that as we go through this presentation. Awesome. Let's talk about demand capture versus demand generate, because this is a topic that I want to define for us all. People go back and forth on it. There's probably no consistent definition. I'll give you how I define it, and maybe that's helpful. Hope it is. But demand capture versus demand generate, and why it's important is a couple of reasons. But first, let's define it here. How I define demand generation or demand generation is the cross-functional strategic process of creating trust and curiosity in your brand, fostering a buyer's desire for your product. So you're like, great, Taylor, that sounds great. What does that all mean? A couple of key points here. First, it's cross-functional. So what I mean by that is it's not just a marketing function. It's not just a sales function. It's really a go-to-market function, right? It's like the entire org needs to be about this, because a lot of times people define demand gen as like, if you look at job descriptions for demand gen folks, it's like, hey, run ads for us, right? Or maybe do social media, or maybe do email marketing, or maybe do website, conversion, or maybe, and then some of the best job descriptions you see out there is, hey, you're partnering with sales, you're partnering with partnerships teams, you're partnering with CS, you're partnering with events, field marketing, ABM, right? All sorts of cool things that I think encompass really the whole realm of demand generation, because If it was 10 years ago, yeah, maybe demand gen was like, hey, do an SEO, right? Or 15 years was like, hey, do an SEO. And you could just do that and probably generate a ton of demand because those channels were less competitive. Now, demand gen has to be more creative. It has to be more forward thinking, outside the box. And you could argue why you can just call this go to market, right? Well, go to market, I think, is even broader, right? Of looking at like from pricing to packaging to partnerships to CS to like looking at the whole entire how do you distribute products. Whereas demand gen is just looking at how do we get people interested in our products, right? How to fostering a desire for your product. And really, if you're in mid-market enterprise, like I mentioned earlier, that's how do you get people book a demo, right, with your sales team. And so many times I was just on a call with some folks last week, general manager of a cybersecurity company, and it was like once we get on a call, our sales cycles are great, our conversions are great, but getting that initial call is so hard. And I found that to be true too. A lot of the companies I work for have great products, but actually getting in front of people, getting them interested is really hard. So that's what this whole presentation is all about. So once again, and kind of two other key points are creating trust and curiosity in your brand. I think a lot of times we forget about the trust building that has to happen. Back to that Forrester stat of 85% happens before sales, right? You have to build a ton of trust with your audience before, whether that's word of mouth, whether that's providing value. And then the curiosity part's really interesting too. I've been in companies where we've done such a great job of building trust that they didn't really know a whole lot about our product, but they had to talk to us because they were so curious in the other things we've done, right? I found, my career started at an MSP, right? Probably just started with this story, but I started at an MSP, and our offering is pretty generic for an MSP, MSSP, so I had to work extra time at this demand generation, right? I had to work extra time on building that trust. I had to outcompete my competitors because my product offering wasn't that necessarily that unique. And a lot of them were like, hey, I don't really know everything you do, which, maybe we could have worked more on our product marketing. We could have worked more on our differentiation and our ICP and all that fun stuff, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And we try to, right? And that's a cross-functional thing. And that's a lot of hard work to do. But I created so much curiosity in the brand that people just wanted to talk to us, right? And so it was much easier to get people on the call because they were like, I built so much trust. I helped them, provided value, et cetera, that I was able to ultimately get booked demos without them really like being like, hey, I want your product, right? Or I even know what you do. But I kind of created that curiosity. So let's talk about demand gen versus demand capture. I like this graph from Brighttail. So another Forrester stat that came out years ago that about 3 to 5% of your target market is in market at any given time. So this is where that stat's coming in right here. Sorry, I don't mean to cover that here, but about 3 to 5% of your target market's in market at any given time. So the other 95 to 97% of your market is not in market. So they're not actively looking for a solution. Intent data is the heart behind this, is trying to capture folks that are on Google, that are on review sites, that are on your website, whatever. I think the new term for intent data is now signals, which I like signals better because intent makes it sound like, at first it's really like, hey, they have intent to buy. Signals could be a variety of things, right? And it's more subjective. There's more room for interpretation. So I like the term signals better. So intent, really looking at, so there's only a certain amount of folks in market, right? And so this is where demand generation has come about, is that all the tactics for demand capture, which we'll talk about in a second, don't work for demand as well for demand creation. And there is most folks are not in market, right? Like, especially if you're in B2C or B or SMB, right? You may have hundreds of thousands or millions of accounts you're going after, or potential customers, right? And if you use the 3 to 5% rule, sure, that's thousands of people, right? That are buying at any given time are in market. So target those people, get them to buy. And that's why in some ways, the B2C and SMB space is so much easier, because you have so many folks that have an acute market need and are looking for a solution, and you can go out there and just capture that demand. Easier said than done, but it's easier in some ways than creating demand. And creating demand and generating it is about how do we get those folks that are not in market? How do we build that trust, build that curiosity over time, so that when they do come into market, either by our influence, right? We've either educate them on a problem, we've provided opportunities for a solution, etc., or they come into market and they think of us, right? Because we built that trust and we built that relationship with them. So once again, we'll get into obviously the demand creation side, but really the focus in this presentation is demand creation, and then I'll talk about here on the next slide demand capture, kind of the different strategies for that too. Because demand capture, there's a lot of great things you can do, and I'm not against it, right? I think cybersecurity companies, I saw a post the other day on LinkedIn, and somebody was talking about how cybersecurity companies have do so much SEO because they're trying to capture this demand, right? And SEO, there's nothing wrong with SEO, and it could be a great strategy for your organization, and especially with AI and trying to get in ChatGPT and all sorts of fun stuff there. None of that's bad per se. The problem with it is though you're expecting somebody to have some sort of intent, some sort of initiating something. There is ways to use SEO. I don't want to talk bad about it. There is ways SEO to generate demand, right? To provide value. Like if people are researching different topics, you can provide helpful content and then build that relationship, et cetera. Get them to subscribe to your newsletter, whatever. So there's ways to use it. But in general, this is kind of how I classify the different the different strategies you can find in these buckets. And so on the demand capture side, you have, like I talked about, intent data and signals. So this is looking at, that's whether it's 6 Sense or whether it's Clay signals, whatever it is, you can find different signals on your website. People are on your website. Those are things you can use to kind of understand if folks are in market and then, reach out to them. Pay per click and PPCs is probably one of the highest intent signals. SEO, they're both tied. A lot of them are used in conjunction with each other. So these are both people that are typing in Google, typing in ChatGPT, and hopefully you can capture those signals. Direct response, performance marketing. So this is ads that are very sales focused, right? That the goal is to ultimately get somebody to book a demo in that ad. So performance marketing, direct response marketing, the predictive revenue model. And the kind of the old outbound ways of using outbound, older ways of using outbound. Those are all, I think in very tied to demand capture, where they're less focused on building a relationship, building trust, building curiosity. They're more focused on how do I book meetings right then and there. And then content syndication, this one's kind of both. In some ways, you can use content syndication to, provide value, provide trust. A lot of content syndication, the wrong way to use content syndication, in my opinion, is just to do book demos. I mean, wrong as in less effective. You can still use it to, do a demo, go onto some platform, get in somebody's audience, do a group demo. I think it probably maybe is a better strategy to go do some thought leadership, do a panel discussion. Once they're opted in and you've built a relationship, then maybe do a group demo, right? Or do some sort of sales focused content. So these strategies are great. In fact, I think you should do all these things, right? And the people I've worked for, the customers I've worked for, the teams I've worked for, do this, capture that 3%, right? But understand, if you're in mid-market or enterprise, your target list, right? And we'll talk about, niching down and having a specific target list. The evolution of ABM, account-based marketing, has been all about how do you find the smallest possible list of folks you can target, or have different tiers. That way you can have really specific messaging, have really tailored outreach, et cetera, et cetera. If only 3%, so let's say you have 1,000 accounts you're going after, right? If you only 3% are in market, only 30 accounts are in market, you're probably not going to win all of those, right? Let's say in best case scenario, you're going to win 25%, right? Your competitors are going to win others. Others are not going to do anything, punt it. They're going to do other solutions. They're going to whatever the other options are. So you probably aren't going to hit your growth goals by just capturing demand. That's my main message here. You're not going to hit your growth goals by just capturing demand. Some folks, I might be, if you're a small company, bootstrapped, you're not trying to grow it exponentially, you're not trying to grow rapidly, maybe you can just do demand capture. At least start with it though, but understand that to get the rest of your market, you're going to have to do demand generation, which is a completely set of different tactics and a completely different set of motions, which we'll talk about. And honestly, I think this is like the exciting part of the less competitive and exciting part. All these channels, super competitive. SEO, pay-per-click, intent. Everyone has intent signals. Every one of your competitors is using 6sense or Clay or whatever. They're all doing direct response ads. They're all doing predictive revenue outbound. They're all doing content syndication. So it's all super competitive too. Not only is there a small market that's there, but everyone's trying to get it. So it's a much harder place to play. It's a much harder markets to channels to play in because everyone's doing it, because it's super easy to spin up Google ads. It's super easy to send outbound emails. It's super easy, relatively speaking, to do direct response ads. Super easy to go sign a contract with 6sense, right? So those things are all great. Do those things, but understand that you're only going to get hits a percentage of your market. And the tactics that I have found to build trust and curiosity, and the other 97% are all these things: influencer marketing, product-led growth, founder-led growth, employee advocacy, strategic partnerships, thought leadership content, event-led growth, customer advocacy, community-led growth. And we'll get into all these things and specific tactics later on in this presentation for all these different tactics. And honestly, this is the exciting part of go-to-market. This is the exciting part of demand gen, is all of these areas. And because not only do they really work in my experience to build trust and curiosity, but they're also great buyer experiences, right? Buyers love these things. They love building relationships with founders. They love self-service options. They love campaigns that integrate their influencers. They love connecting with employees in an authentic way. 90% of cybersecurity is bought through strategic partnerships. People love free content. People love going to events. People love getting, insights from their peers, right? People don't really care about go-to-market teams insights. They care about their peers. People love community and connecting with their peers. They love building relationships. So not only does it work for us, right, from the go-to-market side, but it works for our buyers, because these are all things that folks I have found that CISOs, security buyers all like. And so not only do we know that, it works, it elevates the buyer experience too, especially in a really clouded space. And when you elevate a buyer experience, I think not only does it work for us, but it also helps people find the right solutions, right? I hate when folks have a great solution, but they can't get in front of people because maybe they're focused too much on demand capture and they're not focusing on demand gen. And they're not putting in the work or the resources to actually meet people where they're at and do tactics that people like. Awesome. So let's keep moving. Let's get into my first first kind of strategy and or really baseline. And this is it shouldn't be here because it's maybe obvious, but I think it's actually super important, and I have it here because it's constantly changing, especially in the competitive landscape. My first strategy from a demand gen standpoint is figuring out your unique selling proposition. So everyone says they have the most unique offering, and I'm a CEO, so I can criticize myself on this, but CEOs love to say that they have the most unique product, right? And we're super special. And I went back, going back to the 6,000 technology offerings, the 50,000 service companies out there, you may be not as unique as you think you are. And so what will help your entire go-to-market, will help especially demand gen, is making sure you have a unique offering, right? If you can do all the work. So like I said earlier, that you don't necessarily need to have a unique offering to generate demand, right? Like when I worked at the MSP, I worked really hard on building that trust and curiosity that I didn't necessarily have to have the most unique offering for people to want to work with us, but it would have been way easier. And I guarantee you I would have booked more demos and I would have gotten more revenue if we had continued to refine our unique selling proposition. And this really goes into it's really a go-to-market mindset, and you can't do this if you're like a marketing leader listening to this, or if you're in charge of demand gen, or this is not, or even if you're a CRO or you're or you're or you own all of go-to-market. You can't do this alone because products involved, the entire go-to-market team's involved, maybe even finance is involved. All sorts of aspects of the organization are involved in defining your unique selling proposition because so many things influence it, right? Especially product. Your product heavily influences how you position yourself and how you can position yourself. And if you have a unique product, you can obviously position yourself more uniquely. Some of this, you can do on your own, right? And I think product marketing teams do a great job of this. And if you can figure out where, and there's actually there's a great book called The Mind of the Strategist. I forget his name. He's a Japanese business leader, called The Three C's. The company, this one does brand, but company, competitor, and consumer. And you want to make sure, you have to keep all these things in line to make sure that, it works for the company, make sure you hedge against the competitor, and it works for the consumer. And I think you can never spend enough time on this and making sure you have a unique product. I'll take a playbook out of, something recent. Wiz, I think, is a great example of this, where they had a product that they thought was important for the market, right? They did like network security. And as they talked to potential prospects and their future buyers, they realized that cloud security was actually what they wanted. And so they completely changed their product, completely changed their positioning, and built a product that obviously did super well. So this is part like organization-wide, product-wide, figure this out. It's also part something you can do on your own too. If you can't get organization to change the product or change the direction, then you can, as a marketer or as a go-to-market leader, you can work to kind of figure out what's the competitive landscape, where is our brand going, where is the market going, and how do we make sure we play in all these different areas well. And once again, at the end of the day, do you have something unique from a product standpoint? And if it's not unique, you're going to have to spend more time to acquire your customers, and you're going to have to spend more effort, and it's going to be harder to go to market. It's going to be harder to generate demand. It's going to be harder to book meetings. Not saying it's impossible, right? I've done it in very competitive markets with products that weren't differentiated as well as they could be, but it's just going to be harder. So the more you invest in this, the more you figure out, hey, what really makes this unique? And there's lots of creative ways to do it. It could be your ICP. It could be your vertical focused company. It could be that you're focused on, which we'll talk about ICP in a second. It could be that your product actually is, the most unique product, and you're, for lack of a better expression, the Starlink of internet, right? Where no one is doing, internet like Starlink, right? Or maybe Tesla 10 years ago, right? To use those examples. So I think, once again, you can't spend enough time on it. Let's talk about my second thing here, which we talked about in a second. I mentioned earlier, is your ICP, your ideal customer profile. So this is something, when you think about your ICP, there's also something this is an evolving target, right? Everyone's ICP is constantly changing. The market's changing. Your company's changing. Your competitors are changing. So it's a constant moving target. I've never worked in a company or worked with a company that was like, it stayed the same. So it's not a static box. But what I found, one strategy from a demand gen standpoint, is niching down. It's counterintuitive, but finding the smallest market you can find and start there, and then work out from there. I have this bow tie analogy, which I should really draw it out, but most companies start on one end, right? Where they target everyone. We just need revenue. So we say yes to everyone. And then over time, they end up going to better fit customers, right? The folks that get the most value and you generate the most money from. And you get smaller and smaller until you find the perfect customer. And then you get, you saturate that market, and then you go out again. And so it's kind of a bow tie analogy. What I have found is, if you could start with just niching down, and going back to Wiz, right? Wiz, they had a product that could work for everyone. It was actually a product that was like almost a product-led growth model, where people could just go install it quickly, get value out of it quickly. But what they did was they focused just on enterprise companies, the Fortune 100, Fortune 500, et cetera. And they niched down, and they just targeted those with a counterintuitive product, a very self-service almost product, really quick value product. And I found the same thing to be true. The more I niche down, the faster I'll grow. You can saturate a market. I work with a company that just targets credit unions. That's like their main market. They do work with other verticals, but they have saturated that market. It's amazing the cool things that happen when you do that. where they get invited to train regulators in their space, right? They are, really well known at all the different conferences. They have communities in the space. They're such a leader in that niche vertical, right? Just the credit union CISO space, and been really successful for them, right? And worked out really well for them. So niching down, this is where ABM comes in, right? Account-based marketing. This is where this has come in, where you find specific accounts and you target them. But I think even from the company, I think if you look at publicly traded SaaS companies, maybe not cybersecurity because there's not that many vertically focused. In fact, I don't know if there's any that are just one vertical. But if you look at vertically focused SaaS companies and publicly traded, because those are the ones we have the most accurate data on. Should have said that earlier. The publicly traded companies, it's hard to actually get good benchmark data. Eventually in this community, we'll work on getting good benchmark data for cybersecurity companies. But it's really hard because it's all self-disclosed. And so who knows what people are disclosing. Whereas publicly traded companies, you legally have to, report accurate information. So long-winded story to talk about vertical SaaS companies. So, and they usually always have a lower CAC, a higher, better GTM efficiencies. They always grow really fast. If you just look at vertical anything, right, and they tend to do much better. So niching down, finding a specific vertical, owning that vertical, you can always add more verticals later, right? You can always build more segments later and grow from there. I think that's the heart behind even B2B marketing, like I mentioned. I can't stress this enough that if you're trying to market to everyone, you're marketing to no one. And the folks that win, especially in a very competitive space like cybersecurity, where there's so many options, if you can be the only one in this little segment, grow that segment and then go from there. Especially if you haven't raised hundreds of millions of dollars, even if you have raised hundreds of millions of dollars, I think focus is really powerful. Look at Wiz as an example. Figuring out that the best market you can go after and targeting that versus trying to service everyone. It makes your product better too. When I worked in companies that you just focus on one market, your product is better because it's only focused, the nuances, every little market, financial institutions have different regulatory, standards than healthcare institutions, and versus construction versus government versus whatever, right? So everyone has their little idiosyncrasies and their nuance. And so not only does your go-to-market get better and it's more fine-tuned and you can saturate a market and you can really embed in a market, but your product can evolve better too because it's focused just on that one vertical. Can't stress this enough. If you're trying to book more demos, focus on a specific market, get super niche. How can it be super small? And you can always add more later, right? And think about all your campaigns that way too. Every single campaign, I'm going after one account. If you can get really specific, one-to-one, one-to-few, one-to-many, especially if you have an enterprise offering where you have the justification to spend a decent amount of money per account, then doing really niche campaigns, one-to-one, one-to-few, one-to-many, really, really important. Awesome. Let's move on to my third strategy here, which is, here's a graph here for ideal customer profile. You've probably all seen this. It's nothing's new here, but once again, getting really niching down, figuring out what their business, once you find a specific vertical, you can get really deep into their specific pain points, their specific business objectives. And then if it's account-based and it's a specific account, even more so. My third strategy here is improve buyer experience. This is a touchy one because a lot of my strategies are people don't really like, because especially go-to-market teams or CEOs or executive teams, because a lot of reasons. We'll get into it, but I think especially with AI is, we're at a weird place, folks, when it comes to buyers' journeys and how they're going to change in the next couple of years. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know how AI agents are going to change things. I've thought about creating an AI agent for the cybersecurity world to help people buy things right, because I think people, no offense to salespeople, no offense to go-to-market teams, no offense to marketers, but people don't generally, unless we're really good at our jobs, don't want to read, watch ads or talk to salespeople, right? They want to do self-service. They want to do things that are frictionless. They want to do things that are easy. And unless we're providing a ton of value, which we'll talk about, um, unless we improve the buyer experience, we're going to be alienated that much more. And as AI comes into the place, there's no way AI isn't going to replace aspects of the go-to-market motion and potentially take away some of the control and the influence go-to-market teams from partnerships to post-sales to CS have on the buyer's journey. Meaning it's going to be more self-serve. It's going to be more. We're even seeing this in the SMB space for sure. If you have an SMB offering, chatbots are getting so good that you can sell, $1,000 offering or a $5,000 offering over chat. I'm seeing it. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of lower ACV offerings will. I mean, look at product-led growth. People buy products for that are low ACVs, low average contract values, self-service all the time, and so AI is only going to make that easier to do that. And so enterprise and mid-market, sure, sales, marketing, partnerships, all that fun stuff is still going to need to be involved. But what I'm saying is, over time, AI is going to take away some of the influence we have. And so my objective is, how do we improve the buyer experience? And that's the whole part of one of our values in this community, is how do we improve the buyer experiences? That way, first, we still maintain that control, that influence, right? And we're not giving it to OpenAI. We're not giving it to Claude. We're not giving it to Gemini. We still have that influence, right? And that ability to influence the buyer. And all these big tech companies aren't going to take it away. I mean, if you look at it, this is an evolution that's been happening for decades, right? Google search replaced tons of the buyer journey for salespeople, right? People would go Google things. Social media replaced tons of the buyer's journey. People don't need to talk to salespeople anymore because they have this whole network where they can get review sites, Slack communities, all sorts of things have ultimately, for better or worse, have ultimately made it harder for sales teams in certain ways to leverage that influence, and marketing teams and partnership teams. So buyer experience, if you can make a better buyer experience where people, it's more enjoyable, they get more value out of it, I think you'll win, and especially hedge against the AI replacing and taking over your entire buyer experience, and you lose the control. So here are some strategies I would love for you to consider. Number one is, and you can kind of think of these in order, having a clear and differentiated offer with lots of social proof. This is back to that unique selling proposition. If you have this, it's a better buyer experience. People know what you offer. It's differentiated. It's clear. You have lots of social proof. A lot of people get this wrong though. They don't have lots of social proof. They don't have lots of customer testimonials. It's not differentiated. It's not clear. That's baseline. Quick schedule, a demo. Don't take 3 days to get, a hold of an SDR or a salesperson. Have a quick demo, a scheduling experience on the website. Maybe consider a demo on demand or an interactive demo. Lots of folks don't like this because of competition. With AI, there's no way your customers or your competitors won't be able to find out about your product offering. Sure, maybe there's some unique aspects to it that you leave gated, right? But in general, having an on-demand demo or an interactive demo will only, I think the benefits far outweigh the cost. And I have yet to find a situation where the costs were so great to losing some IP or competitive edge that AI or the rest of the world doesn't already know about. Especially with deep research on AI, you can find out so much about people's pricing, about all sorts of fun stuff that does not justify not having a great buyer experience, not having some sort of self-service option or an interactive demo. Other things to consider would be AI agent instant chat. So the instant chats, a couple years ago, they sucked, right? Like a live person was way better than instant chat. The AI chatbots are getting so good that you can actually answer a ton of questions on demand for folks. Delphi is a tool that I've explored using, that you can train it on tons of information, right? And you can provide that valuable information to the audience, and you can create your own custom trained chatbot that can guide people through a buyer's journey. It can also do all sorts of fun stuff when it comes to just educating people on the market, educating people on your product. Transparent pricing and feature details. Once again, people are going to go find this information. So do you want people to leave your website to go find this information? Or do you want people to stay on your website and book a demo or move to the next step? Do you want them to get old news, right? Pricing information that somebody shared on Reddit from a year ago? Or do you want to get them current information on your pricing and feature set? Once again, it's what people want, right? People want transparency. People want the information. AI is only going to make transparency even that much more hard to avoid. So why fight it? Why not get ahead of it? You control the narrative. You keep people on your website versus them going to ChatGPT. Asynchronous communication. I think this is kind of more futuristic, but where people can communicate asynchronously with your brand, where they don't have to jump on a call, they don't have to, schedule a demo. They can communicate with you in an asynchronous way, video, ask, and there's tools out there that are futuristic there. So some things to think about. Everyone's organization is different, but the more you can invest in a buyer experience, the better. Let's go into number 4 here, which is picking the right GTM motions. This is a strategy and really an organizational thing that's super important when it comes to demand gen, is doing the right strategy based upon your ACV. So I love this graphic by Winning by Design. This graphic talks about, so basically what we have here is number of deals versus annual contract value. And this is not like a formulaic thing. This is more conceptual. And these boxes are super broad too. So I preface it, but I think it's a good way to think about a lot of these strategies, that if you're low ACV, high deal values, things like PLG, community, inbound are all great strategies. If your contract values are much higher, 6 figures, 7 figures, then target accounts, ABM, are all things, field marketing, or sorry, field sales, etc., are all much more applicable. So based upon your ACV, right, whether it's your vertical you're going after or your different segments, you're going to do different strategies. And so if you're, a higher deal volume, a smaller ACV, then doing content and inbound are great strategies. Not to say you can't do outbound, not to say you can't do ABM, but doing like one-to-one target accounts doesn't make sense for 5K deals. There's no way you have enough money to spend on 5K deals. So it's really important to pick the right GTM motions when it comes to demand gen based on your ACVs, right? And think through that process of that. And it also goes for sales and customer success, marketing, all of them, right? Like all of them, you'll have different processes based upon the ACV. And, for customer success, if it's, if you have 5K deals, you're going to have a community, right? Forums, right? Where people can chat and interact, versus having named CS account reps, right? It might seem obvious, but it gets really important when you get in demand gen strategies, because on this next slide, I'll talk through the kind of the different areas. And I love this graph that was at SaaStr that kind of talks through the expensive versus slow, or versus low cost versus expensive versus slow versus fast. And this is how you, going back to this graph, right? If you're looking at, 5K, if you have 5K deals or 50K deals or 500K deals, you're going to want to think about these things, and also where your organization maturity is too. If you're like, hey, I need customers, we're growing really fast, or we're boots, there's all these different considerations, but these different demand gen strategies will play into, like, you're not going to do, I'll give an example. If you're doing, for acquisitions, right, you're not going to go buy or maybe sponsorships, right? If you have or let's say magazine, you're not going to go create a magazine if you have really low ACVs, right? But you might do webinars or product hunt or a newsletter or all sorts of different things. So these things all take into consideration, once again, your ACV, where your organization's maturity is at, and the different, how fast, what your goals are and whatnot. But hopefully that kind of sparks some ideas. But getting alignment on your organization is really important to make sure you're all going in the right direction, right? And that sales, marketing, CS is all pointed, and product development and partnerships, right, are all pointing in the right direction. And you're not doing outbound, inbound strategies for named accounts. Trying to do SEO for named accounts probably isn't the greatest strategy, right? You have like a few accounts you're going after and you're trying to capture them on Google search. Not a good strategy, right? That's more of an inbound play where if you have 5K deals and you have hundreds of thousands of potential customers, and then yes, SEO, doing an inbound approach might be great for your strategy. So number one, picking the right GTM motions on that. Let's get into some more tactical stuff. So this is an area that, so number 5 is leveraging relationships. So it's interesting. This is obviously a strategy, a whole bucket, but it also gets really tactical here in a second. So leveraging relationships, I love this graph here that kind of talks about the spectrum of business influence, and centers of influence is another term for this. But especially in hard to reach markets like CISOs and security buyers, where they're skeptical by nature, rightfully so, right? They're getting not only hit up by salespeople and marketers all the time, but they're also getting attacked by cyber criminals, which sometimes have similar tactics, right? Whether it's email or ads or social media or whatever, they're all using similar channels, and so they're super skeptical buyers, rightfully so, thinking about leveraging the whole ecosystem of relationships. And so strategic partnerships are obviously an obvious one here, but there's customers, there's employees, there's mainstream talent, there's gatekeepers, there's journalism and media, policymakers, business leaders. So there's all sorts of cool things in relationships, whatever your strategy is, whether it's inbound or outbound, or whether you're going after small ACVs or large ACVs, large customers, leveraging relationships, integrating relationship into every single part of your buyer's journey I've never seen it not pay great dividends. So I like to leverage all these things in every strategy, right? And we'll talk about that in a second. But I did want to point this idea out about Dunbar's number. If you're familiar with Dunbar's number, Dunbar's law is this concept where the maximum amount of relationships a person can have is about 150. And they looked at tribes, and that tribe's basically fragmented after 150 people. And so Dunbar's number, I think, is actually a principle you can think about, and it's almost this last moat that your buyer can max out at 150 relationships, right? So if your employee, your founder, your field CISO, your marketing team, your investor, your board member, your strategic partner, whoever it may be, could be one of those relationships. That is a moat that potentially can ultimately be a moat, right? And your competitors won't be your future buyer only can have so many relationships, so it can be something that you can hedge against your competitors and have that moat against them. So concept, especially in when it comes to building relationships, I think you could be one of those 150 people, right? Or somebody in your ecosystem could be. So here's all the different people you can leverage. Sorry for my spelling error on customers there, but customers, partnerships, founders, executives, field CISOs, employees, board members, influencers, regulators, customers being number one, right? And these are some of the things you can do. You can do intros and get referral programs. You can do social proof from customers. You can do co-create content, strategic partners, referral programs. There's all sorts of fun things you can do in all these buckets. I mean, just the partnership area of go-to-market, of the cybersecurity world is crazy complex. There's so many different types of strategic partnerships you can do. OEM, MSP partnerships, channel partnerships. You can do marketplace partnerships on AWS. You can do technology partnerships with fellow technology companies. There's so many partnerships you can do, even partnerships with associations. You can build a unique partnership. Don't just go sponsor an event. Build a strategic partnership with an association, or you provide exclusive content, exclusive resources to that specific association. That's a form of a strategic partnership. Partnerships are, in my mind, is this 1 + 1 = 3, right? How do you create an offering between your two organizations that ultimately create something unique in the market? Co-opetition, partnering with your competitors, right, as a form of strategic partnerships. Most people don't do enough on the customer side. So customer advocacy is a whole bucket, and you can do tons of research on it. There's so many things you can do on customer advocacy that you can generate demand, generate booked meetings, generate content. So once again, using all of these forms of relationships, leveraging relationships in your entire demand gen strategy. So if you're doing a webinar, have your customers come on. If you're running ads, do it with a strategic partnership. If you're doing social media, build out your founders or your executive team's LinkedIn profiles, or have them go and interact on Reddit. If you're doing going to events, have your CISOs go to field CISOs or employees or investors, whatever, integrate them into your event strategies. Influencers, have them integrate into your ad and your performance marketing. Have influencers, regulators, co-create content with regulators, get them to come speak at your events. See if you can go train regulators and build relationships with those regulators. So once again, there's so much cool stuff you can do in here, and whatever you're doing, try to figure out how you can leverage a relationship and build relationships with somebody on your team, somebody in your ecosystem, with your audience. Awesome. We got about 9 minutes left here, and I'm going to talk through my second to last point, which is pre-customer impact, or reducing time to value. So this is the other strategy. If I were to think about any of my demand gen strategies, I would think about two things. How do I integrate relationships, and how do I integrate pre-customer value, and ultimately reducing the time to value. So time to value is a term often used in product-led growth. And how do you reduce time to value, get to that aha moment quicker? I think product-led growth, it's hit or miss in the cybersecurity space, right? There is some product-led growth, like on AWS or some of the market systems, marketplace, that can seem to work well, where people can do a self-service model, or at least less, more self-service than having to go through a sales motion. But when I think about time to value, I think about how do we get to that aha moment quicker before they become a customer. And that's where that pre-customer impact comes in. And this is kind of just a fancy way of like saying providing value, not providing value of like, hey, here's how our product can help you, but actually helping them solve a problem. So most aha moments is like way down the buyer's journey, right? So like down here is marketing, back here is like, partnerships, and then you have marketing, and then you have sales, and then you have activation, and then they get this aha moment. What if we could provide this aha moment way down here? What if we could provide some sort of value, some sort of impact before they ever become a customer? And this is, once again, in combination with relationships, in combination with everything else we're doing. I think this is also a phenomenal way to build trust and curiosity in your brand, is if you actually help people. And I have this concept called the selfless advantage, which is this counterintuitive go-to-market strategy, this is at the heart of it, which is how do we give without any expectation, right? Most times we give when we ultimately, we give after they sign the contract, right? We solve this problem. But what if we gave, and this is really product-led growth. Whole concept is, how do we get this aha moment sooner, right? How do we get it before, as quickly as possible, get to the aha moment? But I think there's, pilot programs and proof of concepts, and all these things are also forms of this, right? But that still takes a tremendous amount of effort and work for the prospect customer to ultimately get to that place of a proof of concept or a pilot program. Those are great. Those are a great, like, intermediary solution. But I think the future, what I found successful, is how do I give so much it hurts, right? Pre-customer, through partnerships, through marketing, through sales, through our executive team, right? How do I provide so much value that I build that trust, I differentiate, and they're like, oh, wow, you helped me solve this one problem, right, on this webinar, or through your ebook, or through talking to sales team. I would love for you to help me solve the other 99 problems I have, right? And so I think this is a tried and true concept. I'm not the only one. And if you even look at how revenue models are changing, really fascinating, another graph by Winning by Design, how revenue models have changed, they started with on-prem hardware as technology's changed too, but revenue models have changed where we're now going towards a pay per action, and eventually there'll be a pay per outcome. And that's where the whole service as a software model, this with AI agents, is that we're doing a pay per outcome model, right? Right now we're at a pay per outcome, pay per action, right? With especially AI is like a certain amount of credits, right? And you see a lot of models have gone to a credit model or a per use model. We're going to get pay per action and eventually a pay per outcome. That's what buyers want. It's more consumption based, less commitment, right? And so buyers are demanding value sooner without commitment, right? And so it plays into that too. Not only can you deliver value sooner, but people want it, right? And that's how the whole models have changed. So here's some things to think about, and this is in this order as well. Of here's some things you can do to create pre-customer impact and reduce your time to value. You can do zero-click organic and paid social on LinkedIn and Reddit. So you can create content, right? That's zero-click, meaning they don't have to click to your website. They don't have to go out of platform. It's in-app consumption. It's in-app built where you're providing value in that specific post, right? You're helping them solve a problem in that specific post. You can do events and community or niche in-person and virtual experiences. You see, I use the word niche, right? We're all doing webinars on cybersecurity best practices, but if you can do a webinar on specific industry, and get really niche, and integrate relationships too. Like all of these, integrate your relationships. Once again, like you got to have that human connection and that human touch to it. That makes it that much more goes that much more further. But I think events and community, super powerful, still a phenomenal way to build relationships, but also provide value. In-person and virtual experiences. I think they both work really well to this date. But if they're niche and you provide value, it's not just a product demo. It's not just your CEO talking about how great your company is. No offense to either of those models, but actually providing value and getting insights and once again making it something that they get an aha, they solve a problem before they even buy your product. Free product and service offerings. This is probably one of the most interesting ones that I found to be really successful. Is if you're a technology company, right? You have a software solution or a hardware solution, but you have a professional service arm. Use your professional service arm as a loss leader to get in the door to solve a problem for them, and then latch on your service offering, your product offering or your technology offering on top of it. I've worked with companies, technology companies and service companies that have done this, where we've used a loss leader, some sort of free product or service to get in the door, and then once again, able to expand. I did this when I was at an MSP. I've also done this at technology companies. Worked really well. It needs to be a quick time to value, right? Where it's like, hey, in a week, I'll give you this deliverable for free. Whether it's a free module of our platform, or whether it's a free service that we provide you. Really powerful. No one wants to do it because it costs your organization money and time. But if the customer is a right fit customer, I've never seen it not work out. And sometimes they skip the free product and go straight to the paid. It's amazing. Like they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm interested, gets them on the call, right? It gets them engaged. And then they eventually just sign up because they're super interested in ultimately buying your product and using your solution. And they want the whole deal. Subscription-based MQLs. So what I mean by this is create a series, newsletter, event series, something that they're subscribing to get more future content, building that relationship long-term. Obviously the newsletter and event series needs to provide value to tie into this. But what I mean by subscription-based MQLs is that it's not just somebody that is signed up for a white paper and then you go hound them with sales. Have them sign up for a series. That way they're expecting to hear from you more, and it's way more natural to be passed off to sales because they're in your ecosystem. They're subscribed to your content. And then last but not least, using sales and outbound as a way to provide value. When I was at that MSP, every sales call, I tried to give them some sort of value in that sales call. Because ultimately I was competing against everyone else, right? I was like, how do I build that trust and value? So it's not just marketing that can provide value or strategic partners or whatnot, but actually have your sales team provide value. Be a consultant, not just help them uncover problems that you can solve so they can pay you money, but actually be like, oh, here's something to consider, or I've noticed somebody else did this over here, and provide that value. Because guess what? If you provide value, they're that much more likely to jump on another call with you. You build that relationship, and even outbound, right? Your outbound emails have some sort of value in there. Share content, share resources, instead of just trying to book a meeting. These two things are probably the most underinvested areas I see. So if you want to outcompete your competitors, I would do these things and consider these things, because I guarantee your competitors probably aren't doing either of those. Last but not least, and I know we're up on time here, is video, and more video. If I just look at my own consumption, how much time I spend watching videos, whether it's on social media or Netflix or whatever, video is a super powerful medium to connect with people. And I think in person is like obviously the number one way to connect with somebody emotionally, build a relationship. Video is number two for sure. Written can be great too if you're a great writer and people love to read, but I still think video, if you look at how people consume content, whatever strategy you're doing, whatever content you're creating, create more video and invest in it. And I'm always trying to challenge myself. How do I create better video? How do I connect with people over video? Because it is, I think, the second to in-person, the most powerful way to connect with people. So awesome. We're up on time. I don't think I see any questions in the chat. So I hope this was super helpful. Here's some stats on video if you're curious, or if you're wondering about, like, it's only, even on LinkedIn, they now have a video feed that, optimizes for video content. So really powerful way to connect with people. Don't discount it. Get your team on video, get your field CISOs on video, get your customers on video, do as much video as possible, do in-person video, right? Film your events and repurpose that for social media, do video podcasts, do obviously webinars and virtual events, do as much video as possible, because I think of any strategy to stand out, that is one to consider. So hope this was super helpful. And if you have any questions, obviously feel free to reach out to me inside the community. You can also reach out to me at Taylor at GTM Alliance, cybergtmalliance.com. Thanks, everyone. Take care.